everybody, my name is Kelly Phones. I'm an educator here at Montavilla Sewing Centers located in Portland, Oregon. Today we'll be working with the Janome M7 and I'm going to show you a variety of ways you can do your 1/4 inch patchwork piecing on this machine. I highly recommend using the straight stitch plate because the normal plate, which is this one, has a 9mm stitch width. So when you're piecing on this, your fabric tends to push down into the opening just a little bit. So it displaces your fabric just enough to throw off your quilt blocks. When you're quilting, it's important to be as accurate as possible, and one of the ways you can do that is to make sure you're setting up your machine correctly. So with your straight stitch plate on, your machine's only going to allow you to select the stitches that you will work with that plate. You can come into your categories here, select quilt, and select 1/4 inch. It is going to recommend that you use the O foot. Now I have the O foot without the guide. This is otherwise known as your 1/4 inch foot. It also comes with one with the guide. I'm going to go ahead and put on the one without the guide just because it's a little easier to see what I'm doing. My personal preference is to use the one without the guide, but whichever way works best for you is perfectly fine. There really is no right or wrong way in doing that. Although I imagine there's people who would have differing opinions about that. So whichever foot makes you happy. Can't get the darn thing on with one hand, so there we go. Whichever way makes you happy is perfectly fine. My preference in doing piecing on this machine is to go into your techniques, which is your t-shirt, and you're going to select your quilting section and then patchwork piecing. And right here you have the option of just a regular straight stitch, a lock-o-matic stitch right here. Lock-o-matic means it's going to do a back stitch at the beginning as well as the end, and a locking stitch. Now for regular piecing, I just use the straight stitch. If you go to the second page, you also have 7mm stitches. If you are working with a pattern that's been developed overseas, you're probably going to need that 7mm stitch because almost everything in the rest of the world is done in the metric system. So another way you can set this machine up for piecing, and my favorite way to piece on this machine, is to use your left needle plate or your HP plate. It stands for high performance. So what this does is it kind of turns your machine into a regular straight stitch machine. It's going to give you the best quality straight stitch machine, this machine can produce. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and lock the machine and have the machine lift that needle plate for us. Remove the needle plate and put that HP plate on. It's a reminder that we need to change the presser foot, and we're going to unlock the machine. You can leave the machine locked while you swap out your presser foot if you prefer. Your machine comes with what's called the HP foot. So from the center of your foot where your needle is to the edge of this foot is a 1/4 inch. They unfortunately have not made one that has a guide on it, which doesn't bother me because my preference is to piece without a guide on my foot. So we're just going to swap out that ankle. Trying to keep my hand out of the way so you guys can see what I'm doing. And we are good to go. So you will notice that every time you swap out a plate, you have different stitch options up here. So with this plate on, you can only do straight stitching in the left needle position. You can still come into your quilting and it's going to have your piecing stitch set up in left needle position for you. So I generally just pick that one, grab some fabric, and that's probably more or less lined up. And I can just stitch right along there. And your fabric really doesn't want to shift or pull or tug on you or anything, so I'm barely guiding that. And when I'm done, and this is a pretty darn good 1/4 inch seam, and it's not like I was being really careful to do that. What's helping me out a lot is how precisely this machine sews. So my favored configuration for this on piecing is definitely the HP plate with this HP straight stitch foot. As much as I like piecing with the straight stitch plate, or sorry, the straight stitch foot, when I'm working with things that stretch, like, I don't know, half square triangles, I seem to do a billion half square triangles, I like to go ahead and put on my AccuFeed foot that comes specially made for use with this HP plate. So I tend to use the HP 2 foot a lot because it doesn't stretch my fabric the way the regular straight stitch foot does. So to put on that AccuFeed foot, I'm going to take the straight stitch foot off, I'm going to lock the machine, and you have to loosen this screw quite a bit when you put your AccuFeed foot on. So you want to tighten that screw down. There's a little hook on the back that you want to pop in. Unlock your machine, drop that foot, and this is a little unusual because with your hand wheel, you want to go ahead and lower your needle. Now, when you have your needle down, you want to go ahead and make sure that foot is tightened all the way down. And I did a really good job this time. I would go ahead and tighten it, give it a final little tightening with your screwdriver. For what we're doing today, we're fine. Then you can go ahead and raise your needle and raise your foot, and you are ready to sew. Now with this foot, you are limited to your left needle position with your straight stitch, just like you were with your straight stitch foot. So this plate, you can only do left needle position in, and you can't shift your needle at all. But for piecing, I don't need to worry about that. I can just take my fabric, and I'm gonna line it up just the same. The difference is on this machine, if the way this foot works, if you try to start right on the edge like a lot of us do for quilting, it's not going to feed correctly. The machine wants to start feeding about a 1/4 inch down from the edge of your fabric. So the solution for that is to take a little bit of scrap fabric, put it anywhere under your foot. When you have your AccuFeed on, make sure you activate the system. And we're just going to stitch down right to the end of that. Then I'm going to raise my foot, and you'll notice my needle is dropped, which is very handy. And I'm just going to tuck that piece right up against my leader, drop the foot, and we can go a little faster than that, and continue sewing. And as you can see, it just seamlessly started on my good fabric, which I don't have lined up very well. But what was important was to show you how to use this foot. So the reason I like this is that it feeds both layers of your fabric, your top and your bottom, at the same time. So it helps to prevent your fabric from stretching as you sew it. So anything I cut on the bias, which is a lot of stuff, I go ahead and I use my AccuFeed system. So let's try to get this lined up just a bit better for you. You can see with this seam on this end, frequently on machines, you're gonna have a problem down at the end. But with this machine, I can sew, I have both edges secured, and I'm not gonna have any kind of problem down here. See how smooth that is? It just works perfectly. So I would say, depending on what I'm piecing, I probably am using the AccuFeed system the most. And thinking at home, I've got the AccuFeed, the HP 2-foot on, and I interchange that with my straight stitch foot. So this is the configuration I have set up at home. I'm a quilter. I sometimes do pretty simple quilts just to show off the fabrics, in which case I'm going to use the straight stitch foot. The majority of the time I do kind of old-fashioned granny quilts, cutting on the bias a lot. So use this system. It is your best straight stitch on the machine. You can still adjust your tension and all that kind of stuff. Play with all of these options and just have fun. Happy sewing and thanks for watching.